What makes a journaling prompt actually move something? Not produce feeling, not generate pages, not create the temporary relief of having externalized what was internal. Actually move something. Change the relationship between the self and what it has been carrying. Produce genuine insight rather than the eloquent restatement of what was already known. That is the question this video is built around. And the answer, when followed honestly, leads somewhere most journaling guidance does not go. The obvious answer is that a good journaling prompt produces honesty. It creates enough safety and enough structure that the person can access what they genuinely feel, rather than what they believe they should feel. It bypasses the social performance that governs most speech and creates a private space in which the real interior can emerge onto the page. This answer is not wrong. It describes something real and something valuable. The twin flame journey produces interior states of considerable complexity and considerable confusion. Having a structured space in which those states can be named without judgment, without the management of another person's response, without the editing that social context requires, is genuinely useful. Most journaling prompts operate at this level. They ask for honesty about feeling. They create permission for the interior to speak, and they produce, in response, pages of genuine emotional content that carry real value. Write about what you are feeling right now, without censoring. Write about what you wish you could say. Write about what you are afraid to admit. These are not bad prompts. They do what they promise. They produce honesty about feeling. But there is something they do not reach. And the gap between what they reach and what is left untouched is precisely where the work that actually changes something lives. Here is what the honesty about feeling prompt cannot access. The feeling is real, but the feeling is not the organizing structure. Underneath the feeling, prior to it, there is a set of beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations that the feeling is a response to. And those beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations are almost never in the journal. They are the water the journal is swimming in. They are so close and so continuous that they do not register as things that could be examined. They register as simply the way things are. Richard Schwartz, the psychologist who developed internal family systems therapy, observed something that has direct implications for journaling practice. He proposed that the interior is not a unified voice. It is a system of distinct parts, each with its own perspective, its own history, its own protective function, and its own agenda for what the journal should and should not examine. Some of these parts are what he calls managers. They are sophisticated, articulate, and strongly motivated to maintain the stability of the interior system. When a journaling prompt opens the door to deep inquiry, the manager part will often arrive at the page first. It will produce fluent, emotionally genuine, beautifully expressed content that describes the interior with apparent honesty while carefully navigating around the specific territory that would actually disturb the system. This is not deception in any conscious sense. It is protection. The manager part genuinely believes that the territory it is navigating around is too much to look at directly, and it may have good reasons for that belief based on history, but the result is a journal that fills with increasingly sophisticated descriptions of what is already known without penetrating to what is generating it. The prompts that actually move something are the prompts that ask a different kind of question. Not what do you feel, but what are you assuming must be true for this feeling to make sense. Not what do you want, But what does the part of you that is afraid of getting what you want believe will happen if you do? These are not comfortable questions. They are Socratic in their structure. They do not invite emotional expression. They investigate cognitive architecture. And the cognitive architecture, when it becomes visible, is almost always more surprising and more generative than any amount of emotional elaboration. Internal family systems gives us a map of the interior that makes these prompts possible. In this framework, the self is not a single voice, but a system. Parts include the managers who maintain order and protect against overwhelm, the exiles who carry the older pain that the managers are protecting, and the firefighters who arrive when exile pain breaks through containment, and who will do almost anything to extinguish it quickly. Underneath all of these parts is what Schwartz calls the self with a capital S, a quality of presence that is curious, compassionate, calm, and capable of genuine witnessing. The goal of IFS work is not to eliminate the parts, but to develop a relationship between the self and the parts in which the parts feel seen and can gradually relax their protective functions. Journaling from this framework does not ask the parts to stop talking. It asks them to identify themselves, to speak as themselves, rather than as the whole truth of the interior. The following 7 prompts are built from this framework, combined with Socratic questioning. They are not warm-up exercises. They are investigative tools. They should be used one at a time, with significant space between them, not as a sequence to be completed in a single sitting, and a genuine note before they are offered. This kind of deep self-inquiry can sometimes surface material that deserves more support than a journal can provide. Therapy, particularly IFS-informed therapy, is not a replacement for this work. It is a powerful complement to it. If these prompts activate something that feels larger than the journal can hold, that is not a sign that the work has gone wrong. It may be a sign that it has gone right, and that additional support would be genuinely valuable. Prompt 1. Write about a feeling you have been having about this connection. Then ask, what would I have to believe about myself, about love, or about relationships for this feeling to make complete sense? Write whatever comes without editing. This prompt moves underneath the feeling into the belief structure generating it. The beliefs that surface are almost always older than the connection. Prompt 2. Notice if there is a part of you that does not want this connection to resolve. Write from that part's perspective. What does it believe it is protecting you from? What does it think will happen if the connection becomes simple or ordinary or certain? This prompt addresses the firefighter and manager parts that have a genuine investment in maintaining the current state of things. Their perspective is almost always more honest and more instructive than the part that consciously wants resolution. Prompt 3. Write about the version of yourself that you are presenting to this connection, or to yourself about this connection. Then, write about the version of yourself that you are not presenting. What does the unpresented version know that the presented version is managing? This prompt creates space between the manager's presentation and the exile's knowledge. The gap between them is where the most useful material lives. Prompt 4. Ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen if I let go of the story I am telling about this connection? Write the worst thing in full. Then ask, what does that worst thing reveal about what I believe I need in order to be okay? This is a Socratic probe designed to surface the core belief that the story is protecting. The answer to the second question is almost always something older and more fundamental than the connection itself. Prompt 5. Write about a moment in this connection when you abandoned yourself. Not when the other person failed you. When you chose their emotional comfort, their perception of you, or the preservation of the connection over something you genuinely knew to be true for yourself. What did you know in that moment that you chose not to act on? What part of you made that choice, and what was it afraid of? This prompt addresses self-abandonment with specificity rather than as a concept. The specific moment carries information that the general awareness of the pattern does not. Prompt 6. Write a conversation between the part of you that is certain this connection is significant and the part of you that is uncertain. Let both parts speak fully, without either one winning. At the end of the conversation, write one sentence from the self that is witnessing both parts. Not a resolution, a witnessing. This prompt practices the IFS skill of holding multiple parts in awareness simultaneously from the self position. It develops the capacity for genuine interior dialogue, rather than the domination of the interior by the loudest or most convincing part. Prompt 7. Ask yourself, if I knew with complete certainty that this connection would never resolve in the way I hope, what would I do differently tomorrow? Not eventually, tomorrow. Write specifically. This is the Socratic question that most reliably reveals what the person actually knows about their own life, that the open question of the connection has been allowing them to defer. The answer is almost always both more difficult and more clarifying than the person anticipated. So what makes a journaling prompt actually move something? Not the permission to feel. That is necessary, but not sufficient. Not the safety of the private page. That is the container, not the content. What moves something is the quality of the question underneath the question. The willingness to ask, not what am I feeling, but what am I organized around? Not what do I want, but what am I afraid of wanting? Not what is happening in this connection, but what am I bringing to this connection from a place so close and so continuous that I have never examined it as something that could be examined. These are Socratic questions in their structure. They do not invite elaboration of the known. They destabilize the assumption that what is known is the whole picture, and they are IFS questions in their spirit. They approach the interior not as a problem to be solved or a wound to be healed, but as a system of parts that are each doing something, each protecting something, each carrying something that deserves to be known. The journal that moves something is not the journal that is most honest about feeling. It is the journal that is most willing to ask the question that the feeling is trying not to have asked. That willingness is a discipline. It is not comfortable. It does not produce the warm satisfaction of pages filled with emotional expression. It produces something stranger and more useful. It produces the specific, uncomfortable, irreplaceable sensation of having actually seen something about yourself that you did not see before you began writing. What makes a journaling prompt actually move something? You entered this video with an answer to that question that was already forming, an intuition about depth and honesty in the value of private reflection. That answer is still true, and it is now inside a larger answer. The prompt that moves something asks a question the interior was not already asking. It approaches the self not as a feeling to be expressed, but as a system to be genuinely investigated. It distinguishes between the part that speaks first and the part that has been waiting for a question, precise enough to reach it. It does not promise comfort. It does not produce the neat resolution of having understood something completely. It produces something more honest than that. The specific and somewhat disorienting experience of the territory becoming larger than it was before the question was asked. That enlargement is not a destination. It is a direction. The journal is not the map. It is the practice of learning to draw one. Pick one prompt from this video, not 7. 1. The one that produced the most immediate and specific quality of resistance when you heard it. That resistance is information. It is the manager part, identifying which question it most wants you not to ask. Ask that one first.